When I meet with folks and do a free consultation, one of the biggest things we talk about are the two different paths when it comes to investing between do it yourself investing versus hiring a full service manager. When it comes to do it yourself investing, really you don't need to do it yourself. You can do it with the help of fee for service financial planner like myself, or join a community of folks who are doing it, sort of do it together investing. But with DIY, really what I'm talking about is opening an online brokerage account. So maybe a Wealthsimple account or a Questrade account. And then typically we're investing using ETFs, exchange traded funds. But when I talk about doing it yourself, what it means is that you're the one clicking the buttons to actually purchase the investments. You're the one deciding what to invest in and really managing the portfolio yourself, that you have complete control over. Whereas when it comes to full service investing, really what we're talking about is hiring a portfolio manager, an advisor, someone to do it for you. They're going to prepare all the paperwork for you, do all the administration. They're going to do financial planning for you and helping you decide whether you should be doing an RSP or a TFSA. And then they're the ones that are going to be selecting the investment products for you. And then you're just going to be transferring money. Again, you can automate those transfers or do it periodically, but you're going to transfer your money to the full service advisor, and then they're going to be the ones that are actually managing the money for you. Whichever way you want to grow your garden, it doesn't really matter whether you want to completely do it yourself and get your hands dirty and, grow the plants yourself, or whether you want to hire a gardener to do it for you. Really what we're doing here is growing your portfolio, is growing your investments. It doesn't really matter which one, but, there are certain factors that help me decide whether someone is suitable for doing it themselves versus whether someone really ought to hire a full service portfolio manager. So today we're kind of going to go through those factors, see if you can kind of identify for yourself which camp you find yourself in. I want to be clear, the worst thing you can do is nothing. Right? That so many people get paralyzed with this decision between sort of DIY versus full service that they end up doing nothing and sitting on a whole bunch of cash and not planting it and growing it in the market. So the worst thing you can do is nothing. The best thing you can be doing is investing. And it's just a matter of figuring out which path is best for you. So the first factor when it comes to DIY versus full service is really understanding what phase of life you're in. That if you're younger and you're just getting started, or really you're in what we call the accumulation phase of your investment career, then DIY investing is pretty straightforward. It's very simple. It's easy for us to automate when you're adding money every month. We can set up things called DRIPs, dividend reinvestment plans, where whenever you get returns from your investments, that it's automatically reinvested for you. It's really simple and straightforward to be able to automate things when you're adding money regularly to your account. The story really starts to shift when we are in the decumulation phase of our investment journey, meaning that we're making withdrawals regularly from our investments. That's when things get a lot more complex. It just does. The automated systems are not designed for automated withdrawals, and it just gets a little bit trickier. You have to make more decisions about what things to sell, if you need to sell to withdraw, what accounts should you be withdrawing from. And so, really people who are approaching retirement or who are in retirement, they're going to get way more value out of a full service portfolio manager, no question. I see a lot of people, and what they do is do it themselves when they're accumulating assets. And then they hit that point where all of a sudden, okay, I'm good. I've grown my garden. It's now time to start harvesting that. And that's when they switch to a full service advisor. That's a really normal path for people to take, because it does get more complex. That when people are in retirement, you're going to want to have what's called a comprehensive retirement plan, which is a roadmap for you to make sure that, number one, you're not running out of money, but number two, that you're not going to die with like a huge boatload of money that you could have used, that you should have spent enjoying your life. So when it comes to retirement planning, we often set up these sort of spending guardrails. We can do a lot of tax optimization to decide what accounts we withdraw from first. Everyone's going to be very different, right? Whether you've got a pension, whether you're in a couple and you each have your own accounts, whether you're on your own but relying on family, whether you get government support or not, everyone is going to have a very, very different retirement plan. So, if you want to keep DIY investing during retirement, no problem. We can get what's called a comprehensive retirement plan. You can hire someone sort of one time to be able to build this plan for you, but then it's up to you to follow that plan yourself. Whereas working with a full service portfolio manager in retirement, number one, they should be doing this planning for you. They should be using software and helping you build that roadmap. And then not only are they going to build the roadmap, but they're actually going to drive the car while you're riding passenger, that you don't have to worry about it at all. They're going to be the one actually implementing that plan and selling the investments and doing the withdrawals for you, so that you really don't have to think about it. You can just tell them, hey, based on the plan, I expect X dollars per month to come into my bank account, and they'll just make it work for you. Really, that's kind of the biggest factor, is gauging sort of how old someone is, how close to retirement they are. And if you're in the accumulation phase, DIY is often a lot easier. As soon as people hit that decumulation phase, definitely DIY takes a lot more work. So that's when a lot of people will lean towards a full service portfolio manager. The second factor in this decision is really about the size of your portfolio, because that's really linked to the complexity of your investment portfolio. When it comes to investment management, it doesn't matter whether it's $1,000 or $1 million, it's still a pie chart. So the investments are still going to be the same regardless of how much money you're investing. But the practical reality is that larger portfolio size does make things more complex on a practical level. And then there's also an emotional component to it, that when the pie's a lot bigger, when you're managing a lot of money, it can feel a lot heavier making these decisions and actually getting things done. So when it comes to portfolio size, really the smaller the portfolio, the more likely I am to nudge someone towards DIY investing. Part of it is that there are these sort of account minimums that to even hire a full service manager, you often need $500,000 or $1 million. Like, they won't even talk to you. I'm really fortunate in that my partner with Genesis Capital, we've worked to lower that minimum investment threshold. When I started with them, it was $250,000. Now we've lowered it down to $100K, which is awesome. And Daryl is great that he'll work with people who are even less than $100K from time to time, which is amazing. So, we've worked to lower those barriers, but it still is, the less amount of money you've got, the easier it's going to be for you to do it yourself. As you have more money, what it means is that we're going to be filling up your planters. That in my sort of gardening analogy, that we have these tax shelters, things like RSPs and TFSAs. There's the FHSA for people who haven't bought a first home. There are things like RESP if you're saving for your kids' education, or an RDSP if you're living with a disability. So these are all different sort of tax shelters. I call them different planters. And the more money you have, the more we're going to want to use those different tax shelters. So the more money you've got, the more likely it is that you're filling up your RSP and your TFSA and your FHSA, et cetera, right? As soon as those planters are full, that's when we use what's called an unregistered or a taxable account, right? My analogy there is that we're now growing food in the wild, right? And that the animals will come and eat little bits of it. Those are the taxes that you're going to pay. We do pay taxes on our profits once all of our tax shelters are full. So the more money you've got, the more likely it is that we're going to fill up those tax shelters and you're going to be planting in the wild. And it doesn't make it necessarily that much harder or trickier, but there are some opportunities for tax optimization there. Most DIY investors we don't even worry about tax optimization. We just keep it simple and we want to manage it as simply as possible. But there is sort of an added value from that full service portfolio manager, that once our tax shelters are full, there are opportunities to be able to take advantage of tax optimization. There's this thing called tax loss harvesting, which is in bad years when the market falls, we can actually sell things and then rebuy other things to harvest those capital losses. Those are sort of more advanced tricks that, sure, you can do it if you're a DIY investor, but you're probably not going to. That's really the benefit of having a full service portfolio manager. Certainly, when we get into the really high levels of wealth, once we're talking about millions and millions of dollars, that's where, certainly more complex structures, things like trusts can come into it. And instead of just retirement planning, we can talk about legacy planning and really, looking at inheritances and donations to charities and nonprofits. Again, that's where, full service is going to be more valuable. So that's sort of the practical side of it. And then just really want to acknowledge the emotional side of it, that I can sit here very coolly and calmly and say, no, managing $1 million is the same as managing $1,000. It's the same pie. But the reality is that, emotionally, I completely understand that those things feel differently. That, when we're managing $1 million, all of a sudden, it can feel a lot heavier. It can feel a lot more intense, right? These decisions are weightier. Really, that's when the extra hand-holding and the emotional support of having a full-service manager becomes a lot more valuable. It's also the case where when you have more money, the fees for full-service management tend to come down. So when you're just starting off with a smaller amount, the delta, the gap between the fees in terms of DIY versus full service are going to be really wide. But as we have more money, right, the fees start to come down. That's how it works in the investment industry, that generally speaking, portfolio managers will lower their fees the more money you have. And so that gap becomes lower. So, and certainly, when you are in the millions of dollars, that's when, really the gap isn't quite as wide. And so a lot of people just opt to say, you know what, I don't want the emotional aspect to weigh on me. And so I really just want to hire someone to do it for me. The next thing we talk about when it comes to DIY versus full service is the level of accountability that you need. That with do-it-yourself investing, when I work with clients, and again, you're not fully on your own, I'm there with you. You can join a community of people to be able to, be investing it together, right? To have that accountability and support. But some people need more accountability than others. If you're someone who's very organized and, has your system such that every month you're going through your finances and you've got a system in place and you've got calendar reminders to ensure that you're staying on top of everything, fantastic. That's really what we're looking for. DIY investing really doesn't take too long. It takes a few minutes just to click buttons every now and again, about once a month or once a quarter. But if you're not doing that, if you're someone that struggles with those systems, then, you might need more accountability. The biggest mistake that DIY investors make is sitting on cash. Either they're putting money into their accounts, but they're not clicking the buttons, and so it's not going to work, or they're just not even putting it into their account. They're just letting it accumulate in their checking account or their savings account. They're just because they just haven't gotten around to it. The biggest benefit of hiring a full service advisor is that they will put that money to work right away. And they will hopefully be in regular contact with you to say, hey, you got any more money you want to invest? They are incentivized. They get paid based on how much money you're investing with them. So they want you to invest money as soon as it's ready. That if you're earning those interest and dividend payments, they're going to be automatically putting that money to work for you. You don't even have to think about it. And they're really going to be encouraging you to put that money to work as quickly as possible. So if you're someone that struggles with procrastination and financial matters, and it's just a little bit trickier for you to do it, that, if you need more accountability, certainly I'm going to nudge you towards a full service portfolio manager, that they're going to be earning their fees by getting you to put your cash to work right away. Especially if you've got a lump sum. I meet a lot of people who, they're investing for the first time, they've saved up a lump sum, or they just sold a house and have a big amount, or they just got a retirement and it just feels like a really big decision. And I've met people who literally sit on those lump sums for years. Just hire a full service portfolio manager. If you're someone where there's a risk of you sitting on that much cash, just hire someone to do it for you and put it to work. Because the gains that you're missing out on, there's the opportunity cost of sitting on cash. That's going to be way higher than the fee differential, right? Again, I need you planting those seeds and growing that garden. And I would way rather you pay someone to do it for you if that's the way it's going to get done, rather than, if you're just, I've got all these seeds, but I just haven't gotten around to plant them. That's the danger of DIY investing. But if you're someone that's like, Tim, as soon as I get the seeds, I'm going to plant them. As soon as I have cash, I'm going to put that money to work. I'm very deliberate and intentional. And I've got my monthly routine and habits to be able to click the buttons and make sure that my cash is always working for me. That's the type of person that's going to be much more suited to DIY investing. The last factor I'm going to talk about is this notion of temperament, or someone's psychology. Investing the money yourself, being your own portfolio manager, does require a certain temperament. What I'm looking for, my dream DIY client, is someone who is cool as a cucumber. Really, I'm looking for that sort of surfer energy of no worries. We're just going to ride the waves up and down. When the markets are good, we're not going to get greedy. When the markets are down, we're not going to get afraid. We're just going to stay even keel and ride out the ups and downs as much as possible. My mantra is often stay calm and rebalance, that whatever's happening in the markets, people are like, oh no, Tim, should I pull all my money out of the markets? No. You want to stay calm and rebalance. But if you are the type of person that's going to be following the news and it's going to be emotionally impacted when we see markets fall, that's a good reason to go with a full service portfolio manager, that they're going to be sort of a line of defense preventing you from making a big mistake. Because the biggest mistakes is when people do freak out during a crash and pull all their money out. You don't know when to put it back in, and so you often miss the rebound. If you're someone where that's a risk, don't even think about it. Just hire a portfolio manager, because it just requires that extra layer of communication, before you make a mistake like that. Some people with DIY investing, they want to tinker too much. So if you're the type of person that's going to be following the news and reading the Globe and Mail and, contact me and saying, hey, Tim, I just read this article and I think I want to make this change to my portfolio, DIY investing might not be right for you. That a big mistake people make, chasing trends, trying to constantly tweak the portfolio. We're not going to outsmart something. By the time it's hit the Globe and Mail, it's already too late. I'm sorry, but it's already too late. You missed the boat. What we want to do again is have a plan and stick to that plan. So if you're the type of person that can stick to a plan over the long term, fantastic. Ideally, we want to be very even keeled in our emotions during a crash. That, not only do I want you to stay cool and calm, but in fact, I kind of want you to get a little bit greedy. That if you're long-term investors, crashes are great for us. As long as we're investing money every month and we have new cash, we're buying at a lower point. And then, of course, we've got a mix of stocks and bonds in our portfolio. So when I say keep calm and rebalance during a crash, that's going to mean selling some of your bonds and using that cash to buy stocks when they're cheap. So ideally, we're not stressed at all about a crash. In fact, we're actually kind of like it when there's a crash, because that's when we can buy in when it's lower. Whereas if you're listening to this and you're saying, Tim, I am not going to be happy if there's a crash, that I'm going to be freaking out a little bit, then, that's absolutely a clue that your temperament is better suited for a full service financial advisor. Because one of the biggest value that an advisor can bring is having that sort of sober second thought, is being a little bit of a gatekeeper to your own money to prevent you from making a mistake. So, those are some of the different things when I'm meeting with someone and trying to decide whether they should do DIY investing using an online broker or whether they should be hiring a full service portfolio manager. Those are a lot of the factors that I'm looking at, that I'm kind of trying to tease out from them. Where are they in their investment journey? Are they in the accumulation phase? Might they be in the decumulation phase soon? How big is their portfolio and how complex is their portfolio? And how comfortable are they with the emotional and the complexity aspect of managing a larger portfolio? How much accountability do they need? Are they good about keeping up with financial systems and actually implementing the plan that we've come up with? And do they have the right temperament to be able to ride out the inevitable ups and downs of the market? Those are really the factors I'm trying to figure out. And that's what I use to then kind of nudge people in one direction or the other. If you're thinking about DIY versus full service, I would encourage you, if you want to learn more, to join my classroom. I have a wonderful course in the classroom called the Foundations course. The Foundations course, it's synchronous course that we did. So I did sort of everything over Zoom, but we recorded all of the classes. I did 4 different sessions. We started with what the banks don't want you to know. And then we covered doing less evil and then doing more good for sustainable investments. And then for the 4th week, I kind of split it up between DIY investing versus full service. And when people were taking the course, I kind of figured they would take one or the other right? That's why I did it as 2 different sessions, kind of choose your own adventure. And like 90% of people watched both. They came to both classes because they really wanted to know the difference between DIY versus full service. So if you've watched this video and you're still not sure and you want to dive deeper into the intricacies between DIY versus full service, then, that can be a really good resource for you, is join the classroom and take that foundations course. I think that'll give you all of the information you could possibly need. And then if you do need more additional support, you can always hire me for a free consultation. Request a free consultation on my website or in the link in the description. And, happy to chat with you to determine whether you ought to become a DIY investor versus hiring a full service manager. We'll see you next time.